If you weren't lucky enough to get Jolter on her recent raid up, fear not, because we have another Jeanne coming right around the corner. Hello everyone, Sobroni of Jeanne Reviews here, bringing you another servant spotlight, this time for the Saint of India herself, Lakshmibai. We'll be examining her stats and skills, as well as going over pointers and how to utilize her effectively, and giving her an overall grade, comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 4-star servants. So if you're ready to answer that eternal question of which came first, the Jeanne-face or the Saber-face, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring my bell so that you can catch all of these spotlight videos as they go up and you can help out the channel. But for now, on to Lakshmi's stats. Lakshmibai has a max HP of 11,362 and a max attack of 9,949. Compared to the other 4-star sabers, her HP falls on the low end of the spectrum, however her attack is well above average for her class. Compared to the other 4-star servants overall, however, her stats fare a little better as her HP is only slightly below average, while her attack ranks very high. When it comes to her command cards, Lakshmibai has 3 hits on her quick card, 2 hits on her arts, 4 hits on her buster, and 5 hits on her extra card. She has an NP gain rate of 1.01% and a star rate of 10%. Like many sabers, Lakshmi has a good stat spread with no glaring weaknesses, however her stats are much more offensively oriented. Her NP gain is good despite only having 1 arts card due to her high NP gain rate, and her star generating is strong for her class thanks to her high hit counts on her quick and extra cards. Taking a look at her skills, Lakshmibai's first skill is Charisma of the Rani rank B+. It increases the party's attack between 10 to 20%, and it also has a 60% chance to increase the party's crit star gen and crit damage between 30 and 50%, all for 3 turns and all depending on level. Her second skill is Assault on the Sipahi rank B. It grants 1 ally invincibility for 1 turn, and it also has a 60% chance of restoring between 1000 and 2000 HP to that ally for 3 turns, and granting them a 1000 to 2000 HP damage cut for 3 hits or 3 turns, all depending on level. And her final skill is Resistance of the Gallior rank A. This skill grants herself Guts for 1 time, reviving her with between 2000 and 3000 HP, and it also increases the party's buff success rate for 3 turns between 20 and 40%, both depending on level. But it will reduce her own debuff resistance by 20% as a demerit. As for her passives, Lakshmibai has Magic Resistance rank A, which increases her debuff resist by 20%, Riding rank B, which increases her quick card effectiveness by 8%, and Goddess's Essence rank C, which increases her own damage by 200 and her debuff resist by another 20%. Moving on to her deck and Noble Phantasm, Lakshmibai has a Quick Buster deck with Quick Arts Buster and a Quick Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is Nahin Denge. It's an AoE quick attack that deals damage to all enemies with between a 600 and 1000% damage modifier depending on level. It also removes all of the enemy's offensive buffs and reduces their critical attack chance for 3 turns between 20 and 40% depending on overcharge. Unfortunately, Lakshmibai requires a lot of Ascension mats that are annoying to farm. For level Ascension, she's going to require 18 Heroes Proof, 5 Bicorn Horns, 11 Phoenix Plumes, and 4 Mirrors. Heroes Proof can be farmed at the pirate ship in Okeanis, where they have a 58% drop rate. Bicorn Horns have a 21% drop rate at the camping grounds in Agartha. Phoenix Plumes are best farmed at the Town Hall in Salem, with a 35% drop rate, and Mirrors have a 12% drop rate at the Rear Mountain in Shamosa. For skill leveling, Lakshmi needs 8 Bicorn Horns, 36 Heroes Proof, 60 Bullets, and 20 Aurora Steel per skill. Bullets are best farmed in Lost Belt 1 at Yaga Smolensk, where they have a 65% drop rate, and Aurora Steel can be farmed at the Castle of Snow and Ice in Lost Belt 2 with a 38% drop rate. Well, we already have a hyper defensive version of Jeanne and a hyper offensive version of Jeanne, so I guess it makes sense that Lakshmibai falls perfectly in the middle of those extremes. Lakshmibai is a semi-support saber similar to the likes of Lan Ling and Nero Bride, and to that extent her stats are well balanced. She has good offensive stats, decent to strong NP gain, and great star generating. And even her weakest stat, which is her HP, isn't all that bad. Her passives also work well with her playstyle. The bonus 8% quick buff really helps her out with her mostly quick based deck, while her very high debuff resistance gives her some good natural defensiveness and can offset the demerit on her third skill. Speaking of skills, her first skill, Charisma of the Rani, is a massive party-wide buff that increases increases everyone's attack by 20%, as well as their star generating and crit damage by 50%. This skill is very similar to Landling's own Demonic Face skill, but instead of being an arts buff, it's just a really powerful version of Charisma. Naturally, this skill is great in crit teams, since it not only buffs damage, but star generating as well, and it can single-handedly be a crit battery for your entire party. However, there is one big drawback on this skill, and that is the star generating and crit damage buffs only have a 60% chance of activating, so it can be very unreliable. But even in the worst case scenario, it will still function as a good charisma. And this isn't the only skill that Lakshmi has that's chance-based. Her second skill, Assault on the Sipahi, is a targetable invincibility that also has a 60% chance to grant an ally a 2000 HP damage cut and a 2000 HP heal for 3 turns. This is a very solid defensive skill. Even without the chance-based secondary effects, being able to shield an ally for a turn from all damage gives Lakshmibai good defensive utility, and if she's able to trigger the additional heal and damage cut, it can give an ally very good survivability for 3 whole turns. She can also use the skill on herself to make herself a little bit more tanky. And finally, Lakshmibai has another skill that can make her a bit more tanky in Resistance of the Gallior. It grants her guts for 3 turns, and it increases the party's buff activation chance by 40% for 3 turns, at the cost of a 20% debuff resistance to herself. As I mentioned earlier, this is hardly a demerit since it's cancelled out by her passives. The Guts effect gives Lakshmi some additional hard defense in case she doesn't use her invincibility on herself. But more importantly, the party-wide buff success rate is huge. At max rank, it provides her just enough of a buff to guarantee the additional effects on her other 2 skills, which effectively removes all of the RNG from her kit and gives her access to 2 very strong buffs. It can also be used to help her allies trigger skills like Imperial Privilege. For skill priority, I do recommend leveling Charisma first, even though it won't activate 100% of the time, because the buffs that it gives are just worth the risk, followed by Guts next to increase her buff success rate, and then Invincibility last. Lakshmibai's Noble Phantasm is an AoE quick attack that removes all offensive buffs from enemies and lowers their crit rate. The buff removal is a good piece of extra utility, and it can be situationally very strong in situations like boss rushes. But unfortunately, the rest of this Noble Phantasm is lacking. The debuff to crit rate is too situational and not very strong, and the Noble Phantasm damage itself is extremely poor. Make no mistake, even though Lakshmibai is considered an offensive support, she's much more of a support than an offense. And to that extent, she does provide a good selection of powerful and versatile buffs. Charisma of Rani is one of the best variants of Charisma available. It gives massive damage buffs to crit teams, and since it isn't card specific, it can work in all crit teams, Arts, Quick, and Buster. The buff to star generating also lets Lakshmibai single-handedly provide enough stars for the whole party, which makes her a very effective crit team battery. Likewise, her targetable invincibility helps protect otherwise fragile crit servants without sacrificing DPS. She can also fit perfectly into some niche crit teams that depend on chance-based skills like Imperial Privilege or Hans's Noble Phantasm. But all of this hinges on Lakshmi's ability to trigger her own chance-based effects, and that's where she runs into an issue. While her third skill can eliminate all the RNG on her Charisma and Invincibility, it also has a tremendously long 7-turn cooldown, compared to the 5-turn cooldown on Charisma. Her skill timings do not sync up at all, and since it is so risky to use her Charisma or her Invincibility without having her third skill active, it effectively makes her entire skill set a 7-turn cooldown. That alone breaks the versatility that her skills offer by making them too slow. In addition to this, Lakshmibai suffers from another huge weakness, her damage output. Despite being an offensive support, her DPS is woefully bad, since her only damage buff is a Charisma that's effectively on a 7-turn cooldown, and her Noble Phantasm is among the weakest in her whole class, with only Fergus and Jason doing less damage. So it's fair to say that Lakshmi has a lot of issues, but there are still a lot of effective ways of using her. She can still function as a decent crit DPS in the right team comps, and she can work as a flexible star generating support. If you're determined to use her in a DPS role, then she pairs well with servants who can give her strong quick and crit buffs like Wu, Hans, and Osakabe Hime. Wu and Hans both benefit from Lakshmi's buff to skill success rate, and they can provide her with strong DPS buffs on a short cooldown. Similarly, Osakabe Hime provides excellent card buffs and star generating. If you're using Lakshmi more for her support skills, then she works well with crit servants who need star generating, as well as offensive servants who have RNG based skills like Ku Prototype, Ozymandias, and Atlante Altar. Ozzy has a buff to success rate skill of his own, but Lakshmi's can help him maintain his Imperial privilege much more consistently, and as a rider, he benefits well from crit buffs. Ku and Atlante are also very strong crit servants who struggle to make their own crit stars, and are more on the fragile side, so they can take good advantage of Lakshmibai's defensive buffs. Lakshmi's Bondcraft Essence is in the end My Will Continues. It buffs the party's quick card effectiveness and NP gain by 10%. It's not ideal, but it can be useful when using Lakshmi purely as a support. However, there are better support craft essence options like 2030, Seaside Luxury, and his rightful place. Basically, any craft essence that buffs star generating or produces a lot of crit stars is excellent for Lakshmibai. For a more DPS focused role, I would recommend craft essences that boost quick card effectiveness and crit damage, like Imaginary Around, Princess's Pilgrimage, and 3 Anglers, all of which will help out her damage a little bit. In the future, I recommend grabbing Looking Up at the Starry Sky. It's a free event CE that boosts quick cards, NP generating, and generates stars every turn. For command codes, Phantasmal Horse works well in damage builds since it buffs crit damage on quick cards by 20%. Overall, Lakshmibai is a versatile semi-support hybrid that ultimately suffers from a slow and ineffective kit. While her charisma and invincibility skills are strong, they are going to be held back by RNG and a long cooldown on her third skill. Offensively, her damage output is below that of every other 4-star saber, and her skill set is not as consistent as other supports and semi-supports in her rarity. That being said though, she does have a good amount of utility, and she can fit into most crit teams. And when she's able to get the most out of her skills, they do work effectively. So all in all, Lakshmibai gets a C from me. Honestly, she's just a couple of buffs away from being good. A Noble Phantasm interlude or a reduction to the cooldown on her third skill would instantly make her leagues better. But for now, she's simply outclassed by the wealth of strong sabers available at both the 4-star and 3-star rarity. And those are my thoughts on Lakshmibai. Unfortunately, she seems to have been forgotten by DW since she hasn't received a buff since her release in JP, which is a shame because she has such a great design and a good gimmick. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over at our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. And I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.